Well, hello there, and welcome to the final week of our class. I can't believe we're almost done. Just a couple reminders for you. Your final assignments are due this week, and they're due this week on Friday at midnight. Remember, that's the end of the term, so we end on Friday, though every other week goes through the weekend. The final week of the term ends on Friday because that's when the semester is officially over. And for some of you, that's great news because you may be walking across that stage and getting that fake diploma handed to you by our new president, Ferguson, I think on Saturday. And for others of you, it just means that you're one semester down, or maybe two semesters, whatever it is. You're one semester closer to walking across that stage and getting that fake diploma from President Ferguson. Whatever it is, you have made it, so congratulations. But remember, those final assignments are due Friday at midnight. So if you're operating on a different schedule thinking you have the weekend, please remember you don't have the weekend to turn things in this week, so everything has to be done. If you want credit, whatever that credit may look like, if you want credits, due Friday at midnight this week, okay? And the last thing that you probably want to do at the end of the semester is do more homework on a Saturday and Sunday as it is. So I just want to remind you of that, give you the heads up, and let you know that that's something that's coming up here relatively soon. Okay, so there's that. If you have any questions, I've not heard from anybody, so I'm assuming that there's no questions on those final assignments. But if you do have questions, please let me know. Again, you have today, including today, you have 5 days left. So please do not wait until the last minute to ask questions. If you're sending emails on, Thursday night, I'm likely not going to respond because it's the day before the assignment's due. And I'm going to be having family movie night with my family on Thursday night. That's what we do every Thursday. And then I have work on Friday, so I just won't have time to respond in kind. So please, if you have questions, ask those questions early and often, okay? But please, please, please do not wait until the end of this week to start asking questions about the final assignments due by Friday at midnight, okay? If you have any other questions, feel free to let me know. If you think I missed something in the grade book as far as an assignment or something like that, you can also look through that and let me know. They're almost all updated. There's a funky thing. I don't think it affects more than maybe one or two of you, but there's some additional assignments that aren't actually part of the grade book. And so if you do look in your grade book and you go, why is there a standalone assignment even though it's already been graded somewhere else? Just know that I see those on my end and I have taken them into effect. And I will not allow those things to negatively impact your grade. And if for some reason you were to have completed that standalone assignment as opposed to the one that's actually in the grade book, I'll make sure to grade accordingly so you get points and you don't miss out on anything. So bottom line is you're not going to have any grade deficit or harm done to you if there's something, for whatever reason, that happens every term. I can't figure out how to get rid of it. So it's there, but I've taken it into account. Okay? All right, so I'm going to try and answer 3 questions. I may only get to 2. I'll certainly get to more than one, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. And if you do get a chance to watch this video, I hope some of my responses are helpful. So I wanted to start with the first one, and it says this. I have learned that there are traits there are learned traits and there are traits that you're born with. Okay? The trait and factor theory seems to describe only traits you're born with. This approach would be different if I'm counseling a teenager versus a person who's looking for a career change. Does this theory give room for those traits that are learned throughout one's life? Now, my answer from a practical application standpoint is absolutely yes. And here's why. So, are there traits, are there things that we are innately born with? Absolutely, right? Personality, different things like that. You are born with certain traits. Okay, great. We also realize that, again, scientifically speaking, we have environmental factors, right? We have trait and factor, all these different things that play into formulating who we are. So we could go in all sorts of directions in that conversation, but the longer you live, you may have a trait, right? Even if you think about the Strengths Finder, if you've completed the Strengths Finder, which is from Gallup, the same company that put out the Wellbeing Index, we still are talking about these strengths are talent plus effort equals strength, okay? So it's not just talent alone, it's talent plus effort. So when you find those things that we would call our strengths, right, quote unquote, and you apply effort, that's when it actually becomes more than just a talent, it becomes a strength. Okay, there may be something that you're born with. You may be great in a room as far as like interacting with people, but But even though you're gregarious and outgoing, what if you haven't developed a social awareness or a social and emotional intelligence to know when you should and shouldn't say things, right? You have to develop that. You have to take the trait that you've been given. I love people. I love being out and about in front of folks. But if I don't know how to kind of rein that in, if I'm not sure how to, even think about social and emotional awareness, then it's not really a strength for it. It's actually more of a weakness or something that could hamper or hinder my ability to succeed. So when you think about our take on this in these conversations, does this theory give room for traits that are learned throughout one's life? Absolutely, right? We may not call them necessarily a trait, right? So a character trait is something that you're going to potentially be born. But even then, we can work on our character, right? We can develop integrity, but the things that kind of factor into creating and shaping who we are, 100%, I would say, we have to take into account all of these aspects, even if a narrow reading of a theory may make it seem that that's not necessarily the case. I would argue that when it comes to boots on the ground, brass tacks, practical application, rubber hits the road, whatever cliche saying you want to think of, we have to allow for more than just the things that we are innately born with. Okay, so great question. Thank you for that. Here's another one for you. Let's see. It says, within Holland's theory, Holland has classified 6 different types of people and said that these personalities will lead them to their career. However, what happens if an individual places in more than one personality type? How would this affect the prediction of what career they might go into? Well, absolutely, they do, right? So if you think about RIA, SEC, there are all sorts of different areas or types that they can place into, so to speak. So you look at them all together. In fact, there's a great website. I can't remember if I linked to it in our course or not, but if you go to Own It, I'll send you a link at the bottom of this video. You actually take those top 3 RIA, whatever it is, SEC, however you rank there in that assessment, and then you plug them in. It kind of narrows, right? So you can look at a very narrow perspective that includes all 3 of those traits, or those, not traits, but types, right? Or you can look at just the first one. So if you're artistic, what are jobs that are artistic, right? If you're enterprising, what's one that's, what's an E? So all of these different things that play into it. I would say, where do those things intersect? So if you think about any sort of assessment, whether it's Holland, whether it's, you're thinking of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the Strengths Finder, all of these different things, here's the deal. None of them, as good as they may be, not a single assessment out there is gospel truth, right? And none of them should be taken as such. We should not put our identity in something that says, oh yeah, you're an E or an I, right? Or you're an R or an S or an A, whatever it is, right? A C. No, because these are just assessments that give a ballpark idea. Although it's a great baseline, it's a great conversation, it's something that's helpful to kind of create this sense of understanding in ourselves. And as we have conversations, we can articulate those things about us to others, and we can find out about those things from other people so that we can be informed on how to best interact with them, right? But we should never place an identity in what an assessment tells us, right? If it says that you are this, right, there's more to you than just being an I. There's more to you than just being a J or a P or a T or an F or an N or an S or an I or an E, right? There's so much more, because that's just this really, really, really small window into, you could even say, an element, like one element, or maybe just a few different elements of who you are. Yes, you're born as an E or an I, and if you try to do something opposite to that, you can do it, right? That's the beauty of, even when you think about the personality types. You can be more outgoing, right, if you think about it from an extroversion standpoint, or you can be more reserved and quiet from an introversion standpoint. When I do any sort of assessment work, I know you didn't ask about MBTI, but I'm going to speak there because they're in some ways very closely connected, right? You have the strong interest inventory of the Hollands. You have all these different things. You can operate, just like the Strengths Finder, you can operate with these things, right? So maybe my preference, if you think about the MBTI, and one of the great things about the MFT program is you are what would be deemed educationally eligible at the completion of your program to go onto the Myers-Briggs company site and apply to be educationally eligible, so that you can, if you're comfortable, and you know what you're talking about, you can administer and interpret the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. The number one thing that I tell folks when they come to see me, when we meet about the MBTI, is that you are not an extrovert, okay? Saying you are or someone else is, we have now all of a sudden, we have given them an identity. We have said that you are such a thing. We've placed you in a box, right? These are helpful terms, but they're not the whole person, okay? So when you look at the results, it's on a scale of 30, 0, 0, 30, okay? So if I'm more an extrovert, as we would say, I'm actually not an extrovert. My preference is toward extroversion, okay? That does not mean that I don't have any proclivities or abilities to operate from an introversion standpoint. In fact, I have plenty. If I tried to only operate in introversion, it would be like, so I'm ambidextrous in many things, right? I do sports left, I write right. I eat right, I wear my watch on my right hand, I put it on my left hand. It's a little bit awkward. I can do it, right? I sign my name. This is my right. It looks weird because fixed looks different in the camera. I sign my name on my right hand. I can still sign it with my left hand. It's just ugly, and it takes a lot more effort. But if I sign it with my right hand, it's like riding a bike. I just know how to do it, right? I'm innately right-handed, but I can do things left-handed. So we need to look at all aspects of somebody. We need to look at the fact that, from a Holland's Codes, that you may not have these, one or two be your highest responses, but they're still part of you in there, or part of them are still in you. Same thing with MBTI, right? I actually did some training where we looked at the combination thereof, and how does that work when you're working with a client to help them think about who they are. My preference is towards extroversion, but I absolutely, at the end of a long week, I need to go stare at a wall and sit in a room by myself. It's just how it works. But I don't want to always sit in a room and stare at the wall, or else that's like signing my name with my left hand over and over and over when I have a perfectly good and better functioning right hand to sign my name. So that's a great question. And I think you look at the whole picture. We look, when we talk about MBTI or any of these other assessments, we need to acknowledge the fact that we are going to have all elements of those things, even if it's the slightest, right? There was an article that came out not too long ago that talked about, it was a book by one of my favorite musicians, actually, and then he's an author, too. His name is Andrew Peterson. He talked about how it's not just for the creatives that they should be creative. All people should be creative. All people, in fact, are creative. It's just that some of us have flexed that creative muscle, or we have applied more effort, like we talked about with strengths, to the talent, and then it's become strength, right? So we may not be, Mona Lisa drawing individuals, but we could probably do more than a stick figure if we just continue to give effort to that, right? So that's a great question. I know I kind of answered it in a roundabout way, but nice work. And then last one, really quickly, how do counselors determine which theory to use on a client or incorporate in session? Is there one theory better suited for certain individuals, or is it just based on preference of the counselor? I would say it's to an extent based on preference of the counselor, but I would argue it's probably more based on the needs of the client. Okay, so you may find that you really, really, really love fill in the blank. I don't know what it would be, theory. And if you tried to apply that specific theory because it's your preference to do so to every single client, it's like trying to, hit a square peg in a round hole. What we need to do, although we are offering counseling, is we do need to approach things from a coaching standpoint. And I would argue ask so many questions to get to know who the client is so that we know what they need, right? So this is why, and you look at a class like this, are you going to know everything about career counseling? Not at all. Are you going to know some things? You bet. Or will you know a lot of things? Well, you know a little bit about a lot. And the things that you're most interested, dig down into, but I still would argue that you need to know about all of these different theories and frameworks, because who knows what the client on the other side of the desk or the table is going to need. So what are you doing to equip yourself, right? How are you kind of placing the arrows in the quiver, so to speak, so that when you meet a client that's a unique client that actually has needs that no other client that you've worked with has, you know what might best work for them. And maybe it's not just the one silver bullet. Maybe it's, let's try a couple of things. Or what do you think about this? I've got these different, assessments, or I've got this different framework we can use. What do you think would benefit you? And then just kind of applying it and seeing what happens. So yes, it's based on preference, but I would argue it's more based on the needs of the client, and you have to ask a lot of questions to get there. Great questions. Thanks so much. Have a great week.